As Boeing struggles to fix its Starliner, Elon Musk is eating its lunch in space. Yeah, this statement can be regarded as a humorous anecdote sourced from somewhere, as Elon Musk hasn't gone to space so far. Maybe he doesn't like it. However, metaphorically thinking, this also holds undeniable truth. While SpaceX Dragon launched up to 10 crews in space, the Starliner Crewed Flight's last test is scheduled to fly no earlier than July 2023. Especially what SpaceX Dragon just did definitely makes no one want to fly on Starliner anymore. How and why? Find out everything about this in today's episode of Alpha Tech. A SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule carrying a retired astronaut, a wealthy adventurer, and 2 Saudi astronauts caught up with the International Space Station on Monday, wrapping up an automated 15-hour rendezvous with a picture-perfect docking, also a record-setting trip to the orbiting laboratory. Catching up from behind and below, the spacecraft passed 1,300 feet below the lab complex, then looped up to a point directly above the Forward Harmony module's space-facing port. From there, the craft moved in for docking at 9:12 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. It was a lovely ride. It was the softest docking I've ever felt, AX-2 Commander Peggy Whitson radioed SpaceX flight controllers, referring to the 3 earlier trips to the station aboard a space shuttle and Russian Soyuz ferry ships.
Thanks, Peggy. We do aim for excellence, and on behalf of SpaceX, it's been a pleasure working with you.
For SpaceX, the docking occurred 15 hours and 35 minutes after Whitson and her crewmates, John Schaffner, and Saudi Space Commissioner astronauts Ali Al-Qarni and Rayana Barnawi lifted off. It's the fastest trip for a crewed flight by SpaceX, the company said. 2 hours later, after extensive leak checks, Whitson, a retired astronaut and America's most experienced space flyer, led her 3 rookie crewmates into the station where the 7-member Expedition 69 crew was waiting to welcome them aboard.
Congratulations with a successful launch and your docking. And as for me, this is a very great honor to work next with Peggy Whitson, most experienced and decorated astronaut in the U.S. Astronaut Corps,
said cosmonaut Sergei Probkiev, the station commander. Replied Whitson,
we really are excited to be here. It was a great launch, a great ride. We had a lot of fun on the way up, and we're really excited to get a lot of work done up here. But it's great for me to come back personally. It does feel like home.
The AX-2 mission is the second private Crew Dragon flight chartered by Houston-based Axiom Space and sanctioned by NASA as part of an initiative to encourage private sector development in low Earth orbit. It's the first such mission with 2 government-sponsored astronauts, Saudi nationals Ali Al-Qarni and Rayana Barnawi. AX-2 co-pilot John Schaffner, a retired fiber optics entrepreneur, private pilot, and high-performance race car driver, paid an undisclosed amount for his first space flight, while Al-Qarni and Barnawi, the second and third Saudis to fly in space, represent the Saudi Space Commission. Whitson is Axiom Space's director of human spaceflight.
Congratulations, new astronauts, Rayana, John, Ali. My big congratulations of Saudi Space Commission, and I'm sure you will have a great achievement in the future in your space exploration. Thank you so much, and welcome aboard.
If all goes well, Whitson and company will undock on May 30th and return to Earth, splashing down off the coast of Florida to close out SpaceX's 10th piloted Crew Dragon flight. Well, SpaceX does not lose any dollars for advertising any of its services, but it's the real sharing of customers after experiencing their service that says it all. Without a doubt, SpaceX Dragon stands unrivaled as the best spacecraft in the world right now. And when reflecting upon its childhood companion, the Boeing Starliner, the stark contrast becomes readily apparent. The first piloted flight of Boeing's Starliner astronaut ferry ship has been slipping to at least July 21st. Boeing and SpaceX were awarded contracts in 2014 to build commercial cruise ships that could carry NASA and partner agency astronauts to and from the space station. SpaceX, under an initial $2.6 billion contract, designed a crewed version of its Dragon cargo ship that would ride into orbit atop the company's Falcon 9 rocket. Boeing designed its own capsule, Starliner, under a $4.2 billion contract, relying on United Launch Alliance Atlas V rockets for the trip to orbit. After a stressful, unpiloted test flight, SpaceX launched a two-man crew to the space station in May 2020. The company has now launched 9 piloted Crew Dragon missions, 7 for NASA, and 2 privately funded flights, ending the nation's sole reliance on Russian Soyuz spacecraft for access to low Earth orbit. Boeing had hoped to launch its first crew in 2020 as well, but the company ran into major software problems during an unpiloted test flight in December 2019. After resolving unexpected trouble with corroded propulsion system valves, another test flight was launched in May 2022. This time around, the Starliner completed its major objectives, robotically docking with the space station as planned. At that point, NASA was aiming for a piloted launch later that year. But additional analysis and reviews pushed the flight into 2023, and after several more slips, it's now moved out to July, assuming the necessary work can be completed in time and planners resolve a launch date conflict with another Atlas V mission. After that, even when Starliner goes into operation, it'll never be able to catch up with Dragon, and if given the choice, probably no one would choose Starliner over Dragon. The most crucial aspect that distinguishes Dragon from Starliner is its proven success. SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft has an illustrious track record with numerous successful missions to the ISS. Its reliability and safety in transporting astronauts to and from space have been demonstrated time and again. The accomplishments of Dragon instill confidence not only in space agencies like NASA, but also in the general public, who recognize its capacity for delivering consistent results. There is another significant programmatic concern, with a limited number of human-rated Atlas V rockets remaining in ULA's inventory. ULA has 24 more Atlas V rockets to fly before retiring the rocket in favor of the less expensive, more powerful Vulcan Centaur rocket. 8 of those 24 rockets are already allocated to the Starliner program, enough to fulfill Boeing's contractual requirements to NASA, which includes 2 more test flights and 6 operational crew rotation missions to the space station. However, ULA's new Vulcan rocket has not yet flown, so the factor that the Vulcan launch vehicle slated to replace the Atlas V for Starliner launches needs to be certified for human spaceflight, and the process of getting that certification could take years. West, a longtime engineering safety manager and examinations director at the Board of Certified Safety Professionals, said general concerns about the NASA and contractors' workforce across the agency's human spaceflight program have particular significance in Boeing's case. The panel has noted that Boeing's staffing levels seem to be especially low, West said. The panel will be monitoring the situation in the near future to see what impact, if any, this could have on the existence or mitigation of any safety risks. Finally, cost-effectiveness is a crucial factor in the realm of space travel, and Dragon excels in this area as well. The reusable rocket technology employed by SpaceX drastically reduces launch costs. By reusing major components of the spacecraft, such as the first-stage booster, SpaceX has demonstrated a pioneering approach that makes each subsequent launch more affordable. This cost-saving advantage has the potential to revolutionize space exploration by providing more frequent access to space, opening doors for scientific research, commercial ventures, and even potential colonization. In short, the Falcon 9 rocket and Crew Dragon spacecraft will very likely remain the lowest risk and lowest cost means of putting humans into orbit for at least the next decade. Next, 3 years ago this week, we launched our first human spaceflight mission to orbit. Thank you NASA, Inspiration 4X, Axiom Space, and the 38 astronauts from all around the world for flying SpaceX. Wow. In just 3 years, SpaceX Dragon has completely changed everything. What was once likened to a trampoline, Dragon has now turned into the best spacecraft in the world, crushing Starliner and even Soyuz. More importantly, astronauts just revealed Dragon is the safest. A SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft undocked from the International Space Station and plunged back to Earth late Tuesday, blazing through the night like a fiery shooting star before splashing down in the Gulf of Mexico. With veteran commander Peggy Whitson and co-pilot John Schaffner monitoring the automated re-entry, flanked on left and right by first-time Saudi astronauts Ali Arqani and Rayana Barnawi, the capsule's braking rocket fired at 10:14 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, slowing the ship just enough to drop to the far side of its orbit into the atmosphere. 26 minutes after that, still moving at nearly 5 miles a second, the Crew Dragon slammed into the discernible atmospheric heat shield first, enduring temperatures up to 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit as it descended along a northwest to southeast trajectory across the heartland of the U.S. Multiple videos were posted on Twitter showing the spacecraft's eye-catching re-entry from Oklahoma to southern Mississippi, prompting amazement and curiosity about what was causing that spectacular sky show. Not surprising, perhaps, given SpaceX didn't provide any guidance on the capsule's path across the United States. In any case, 12 hours after undocking from the space station and 34 minutes after the deorbit burn, the Crew Dragon's 4 main parachutes unfurled, lowering the ship to a gentle splashdown at 11:04 p.m., south of Panama City, Florida.
On behalf of SpaceX, welcome home.
A flight control engineer radioed from SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California.
Well, in SpaceX, we would like to tell you that was a phenomenal ride. We really enjoyed all of it.
AX-2 Commander Peggy Whitson, America's most experienced space astronaut with 3 earlier trips to the station aboard a space shuttle and Russian Soyuz ferry ships, said just after splashdown. Previously, after docking to ISS, she also shared, "It was a lovely ride. It was the softest docking I've ever felt. Very well done." Many tears of honest joy here because we've had a great team and a great week. So congratulations to the Axiom team. Your crew did an amazing job. Congratulations to SpaceX on a beautiful launch and what we are sure will be a beautiful recovery, NASA astronaut Frank Rubio concluded. Yeah, just looking at the difference in this photo, we can feel how comfortable Dragon is compared to Soyuz. The Crew Dragon has been designed to provide a comfortable environment for astronauts during their journey to and from the ISS. It features modern touchscreen controls, a sleek interior, and improved seating arrangements compared to previous space capsules. The seats are custom-made and contoured to provide better support and comfort for astronauts during the mission. On the other hand, Soyuz is very small with Spartan crew compartments. This limits movement, especially on trips longer than 2 days. A 3-person crew would be pretty uncomfortable during that time, which is why Soyuz ISS flights often use a hybrid launch configuration that gets the crew to the station in a few hours rather than days. It's too small and tight, Dutch European Space Agency ESA astronaut Andrei Kuipers of the Russian Soyuz spacecraft complained. The Dragon is the best, astronaut Soichi Noguchi, who's one of the world's most experienced active astronauts ever, said. His first space flight was aboard NASA's Space Shuttle Discovery, the first to return to space after the deadly breakup of Space Shuttle Columbia in 2003. I feel Dragon's really ready to go up. It's really fun to ride, and 2 days in Dragon is really remarkable memories, Noguchi added. At this point, you can tell I'm a bit unfair when comparing Dragon with the spaceships of centuries past, but honestly, its closest competitor, Boeing Starliner, is even facing emerging issues ahead of their first crewed flight in July. Boeing still has some work to do to get its astronaut taxi ready for its first crewed jaunt this summer. That mission, called Crew Flight Test or CFT, will launch astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams to the ISS aboard Boeing's Starliner capsule no later than July 21st. Boeing aims to fuel Starliner next month in preparation for liftoff. During a checkpoint review conducted last Thursday on May 25th, the company and NASA identified a few emerging issues that need a big path to closure to resolve before taking that next step, according to NASA. For example, teams will replace a bypass valve in the system that helps cool Starliner's avionics, NASA officials wrote in an update on Friday, May 26th. Such work is expected to take a week and won't affect the planned CFT timeline, they added. Technicians and engineers are also assessing whether a certain kind of tape used to protect some of Starliner's wires poses a flammability risk, and Boeing and NASA teams are reassessing the efficiency of some joints in Starliner's parachute system, based on new data reviews as part of the ongoing design certification process, agency officials said in Friday's statement. We are taking a methodical approach to the first crewed flight of Starliner, incorporating all the lessons learned from the various in-depth testing campaigns, including Starliner's flight tests and the agency's verification efforts, Steve Stitch, manager of NASA's Commercial Crew Program, said in the same statement. All orbital flight test 2 anomalies are closed, Stitch added, referring to Starliner's first test mission, a successful uncrewed flight to the ISS that launched in May 2022. In addition to the closeout of ongoing work, the team remains vigilant on tracking new technical issues as we complete certification for crewed flight. Earlier this year, Boeing and NASA said that CFT was on track to launch in April, but in late March, The target date was pushed back to no earlier than July 21st, a move made to accommodate further analysis of Starliner and its systems and an anticipated busy spring at the ISS. NASA and Boeing have completed most of the prep work needed to get Starliner ready for CFT, agency officials said in Friday's update, but another delay isn't out of the question, they added. Crew safety remains the highest priority for NASA and their industry providers, and emerging issues are not uncommon in human spaceflight, especially during development, Stitch said. The combined team is resilient and resolute in their goal of flying crews on Starliner as soon as it's safe to do so. If a schedule adjustment needs to be made in the future, then we will certainly do that as we have done already. We will only fly when we are ready. Okay, hope that's soon. 6 years is already late enough as it is. Back to SpaceX Dragon. SpaceX will send 2 more Dragons to the orbiting lab soon if all goes according to plan. The company plans to launch a robotic cargo mission to the ISS on Saturday, June 3rd, and SpaceX's Crew 7 mission, which will send 4 astronauts to the orbiting lab for NASA, is scheduled to fly on the Crew Dragon Endurance in August. Interestingly, Russians will fly on SpaceX's Crew 7 and Crew 8 astronaut missions. Russia's federal space agency, Roscosmos, has access to SpaceX commercial crew flights through seat swap agreements that are negotiated ahead of crew assignments. NASA also continues to fly American astronauts aboard Soyuz, but to a lesser degree. Notably, Starliner is not yet included in the Russia-US seat swap agreements, but Boeing's expected to include Russian cosmonauts after post-certification missions start in 2024. The Russian assignments for Crew 7 and Crew 8 are tentative at this time, but Roscosmos announced March 1st on Telegram that they plan to add 2 unflown cosmonauts to the manifest: Konstantin Borisov to Crew 7 and Alexander Grabyankin to Crew 8. Crew 7 should fly in the fall, while Crew 8 will go in the first part of next year if schedules hold. Well, this is truly an outcome that no one could have imagined 9 years ago. One was a venerable giant with a legacy in aerospace that stretched back more than 100 years and a role in every major moment in NASA's history. The other was a relative upstart that in its early days was derided as a little more than a delusional billionaire's fantasy and that critics said was building its rockets out of wax and rubber bands. No one thought Elon Musk's SpaceX would ever beat Boeing to space. Some members of Congress even wondered why NASA would bother awarding contracts to 2 companies to build capsules to fly astronauts to the International Space Station under NASA's Commercial Crew Program. Just let Boeing do it. But from all appearances, SpaceX has clearly won the competition. Let's imagine, at that time, if NASA only chose Boeing. The US space would have to depend on Russia, as Starliner has no hope while SpaceX orbits daily. Boeing is standing down from the first ever crewed launch of its Starliner astronaut capsule for NASA, possibly indefinitely, due to safety issues with the spacecraft's parachutes and wiring that were discovered last week. The Starliner astronaut launch, already years behind schedule, was most recently targeted to launch 2 NASA astronauts to the International Space Station on July 21st. Now, that's probably not going to happen at all this summer, and it may not even be this year. 2 major safety issues are driving the latest delay. Both of them were discovered last week during in-depth reviews of Starliner to certify the spacecraft for crewed flight, NAPI said. First, Boeing engineers discovered that the soft links used on the suspension line of Starliner's 3 main parachutes have a failure load limit that's actually lower than previously thought. It turns out those links, which secure the parachute lines with their anchor tethers on the capsule, cannot handle the load of Starliner if one chute fails. Being able to land safely with 2 out of 3 chutes is a safety requirement for NASA, NAPI said. The second safety issue Boeing found pertains to the protective tape covering the wiring harnesses throughout the Starliner capsule. That tape, NAPI said, is flammable, and there are hundreds of feet of it inside Starliner. It's highly unlikely that we'd go in and cut this tape off, NAPI said, adding that doing so would likely cause more potential damage. So we're looking at solutions that would provide for essentially another style of wrapping over the existing tape in the most vulnerable areas that reduce the risk of fire hazard. Boeing's latest Starliner delay follows a string of setbacks for the spacecraft. In December 2019, Boeing's first uncrewed test flight of Starliner failed to reach its proper orbit and could not rendezvous with the International Space Station as planned. It ultimately had to land earlier than intended. A follow-up NASA investigation ultimately tasked Boeing to make 80 different corrective actions to address safety and other issues with the Starliner spacecraft. The company also had to launch a repeat uncrewed test flight, which successfully reached the space station in May 2022 after its own series of delays over valve issues. The flammable tape issue and the parachute soft link issues were both present on that flight, but the mission was a success, NASA officials said. Meanwhile, two NASA astronauts, Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore, have been waiting and training to fly Starliner's first crewed flight, called Crew Flight Test. At the start of the year, that test flight was targeted for February, but it has steadily slipped later and later in the months since. In 2021, two other NASA astronauts originally assigned to fly on Starliner, Nicole Mann and Josh Casada, were reassigned to fly on SpaceX's Dragon so they could complete their missions. Both have since done so. SpaceX definitely saved Boeing here, but it's also a huge shame. SpaceX is continuing to make miracles. A SpaceX capsule carrying a decorated former NASA astronaut and 3 paying customers returned home from the International Space Station on May 30th, concluding a historic week-long mission for the crew. AX-2 was the first trip to space for Schaffner, Alcarni, and Barnawi. All 3 of the rookies gushed about the mission, saying it was the experience of a lifetime. "It was an amazing experience to look out the window and see the world underneath you," Alcarni said. On top of that, less than a week since that day, the SpaceX Dragon team's gone on another mission. 2 more rollout solar arrays were ridden on a SpaceX cargo ship to the International Space Station last weekend, continuing a years-long midlife station upgrade as NASA plans procurement of a final set of new solar wings to fully reinforce the lab's power supply. The 2 solar arrays are rolled up on spools to fit inside the 4-meter diameter of the Dragon spacecraft's rear cargo bay. Later this month, Steve Bowen and Woody Hoberg will head outside the space station for 2 spacewalks to install and assist in the deployment of the 2 rollout solar arrays. NASA sent 4 rollout solar arrays to the space station on SpaceX resupply missions in June 2021 and November of last year. SpaceX launched this space station cargo delivery mission under contract with NASA's Commercial Resupply Services program. This mission, called CRS-28, hauls 3,304 kilograms of cargo to the station, primarily hardware for upgrades and space station maintenance, along with crew supplies. In the 4th flight of this Cargo Dragon spacecraft, designated C208, SpaceX has 3 Cargo Dragon capsules in its inventory, and 4 human-rated Crew Dragon vehicles, with a 5th Crew Dragon in production. SpaceX says it aims to fly each vehicle as many as 15 times, and the existing fleet, along with the new Crew Dragon in manufacturing now, will be sufficient to meet the customer demand for resupply and astronaut flights, primarily to the International Space Station. The Cargo Dragon spacecraft will deliver equipment to maintain the space station's urine processing system, which recovers and treats fluid from urine and converts it to drinking water for the space station crew. At the end of the CRS-28 mission, the reusable Dragon capsule will undock from the station and head for a parachute-assisted splashdown off the coast of Florida in late June, with several tons of cargo and research specimens. So that's just Dragon. The SpaceX Falcon 9 is even more impressive. Last week, the company hit a significant milestone: 200 successful launches of the Falcon 9. To put this accomplishment into perspective, it propels Falcon 9 into uncharted territory, surpassing the track record of any orbital rocket in history. There are only 2 other rockets with a string of successful flights comparable to the Falcon 9. One is the Soyuz U variant of the Russian rocket, which launched 786 times from 1973 to 2017. The other is the American Delta II rocket, which recently retired. The Soyuz U rocket held a streak of 112 consecutive successful launches between 1990 and 1996. It's worth noting, though, that one of these missions, the Cosmos 2243 launch in April '93, encountered a critical failure. This incident, where the rocket's control system malfunctioned during the Block 1 burn's final phase, resulted in the payload being intentionally destroyed. Taking this failure into consideration, the Soyuz U rocket ran 100 successful launches from 1983 to 1986. Next, the Delta II rocket, initially developed by McConnell Douglas and later operated by Boeing and United Launch Alliance, also achieved 100 consecutive successes during the same period. Notably, the Delta II rocket had a total of 155 launches, with only 2 failures throughout its operational lifespan. Its final mission in 2018 marked Delta II's 100th consecutive successful flight. As SpaceX continues to push the boundaries of space exploration, its achievement of 200 successful Falcon 9 launches stands as an unparalleled feat in the history of rocketry. And that just about wraps it up for today's episode. Don't forget to share your ideas in the comments section below. Everyone's support motivates us to create more quality videos. And for that, we thank you so much and hope to see you next time. Bye!